tangent, I swear
Oh
to God.
boy. Oh boy. Oh boy.
So somebody said that science-based training principles seem to be on increased scrutiny recently, including Van Wyck,
Oh boy.
Nippert, Jordan Peters critiqued people the other day on a post. What are my thoughts on driving the increased criticism if I believe it's actually increasing? I'm glad you added that caveat because I don't. And there's a point in a pro bodybuilder or strongman's career that some science-based principles based on these studies don't apply. All right. First and foremost, the amount of people claiming to be science and evidence-based versus the amount of people who actually are is vastly, vastly different. The people, the big meatheads who are saying science-based lifting is stupid is based on the large population of kids on TikTok regurgitating shit from other people. They're not science-based, they're not evidence-based, and anybody claiming any of these crazy trends that I've been seeing as evidence-based are completely wrong because they're skewing in the direction of less volume, more failure, and basically anything opposite of what we're actually seeing in the hypertrophy realm of studying. As far as I'm concerned, currently the situation and the landscape of volume is we're not seeing the inverted U like we thought. And if you guys don't follow data-driven science, you really should. We're not seeing a cap of volume. We are seeing that there's a decrease clearly. We don't know where that is. But all these things that we're seeing in the data, if people really break it down and look at it, and I'm seeing the trends on social media, are very opposite. I'm seeing kids do singles for hypertrophy because they're regurgitating some other person and claiming that it's the most evidence-based thing possible. Now you have these kids spreading information, they're regurgitating shit to others, and then you have guys who are really jacked, who have done a lot of crazy shit, high volumes, intensity techniques, actually been there, done that, which if you take into consideration, these guys, to me, a kid online regurgitating something they heard from somebody versus a 20 plus year in the industry bodybuilder who's seen every trend come and go, who has the anecdotal evidence, which let's not forget is part of science. It's part of evidence-based. The bodybuilder is more evidence-based than the kid. So you have some guys who are really angry and old, who are ranting on social media, which has always happened, and they've always ranted, and it's not increasing per se. Mm-hmm. It's just there. It's very evident. And because you guys are in this RPU community and you really highly value what me and Mike teach, and a lot of what me and Mike teach is hypertrophy, you see it. You're following these other guys. You're following the Dr. Deans. You're following the Chris Beardsleys. You're following the Paul Carters. You're following us. You're following Jeff Nippert. You're following everybody who has all these varying different opinions. And you're seeing a couple of these guys who are angry enough to rant in an angry tone. And I've been that in the past because there's a lot of bullshit. And some of them aren't intelligent enough to understand that some of the kids claiming to be science are not science-based. So I think they have, as far as anger goes, like, I'm not saying go fucking push somebody over a bench, but as far as your passion lies, they have a right to be passionately annoyed by a 120-pound kid saying, if you put the cuff up by your shoulder and you just perform singles in isolation, you're getting the most stimulus because you're recruiting the most muscle fibers. They're just regurgitating some shit they heard. Yeah, that makes me pretty fucking mad too. I'm not going to lie. But then at the same time, a lot of these other guys who claim to be evidence-based are completely on the other side of what we're actually seeing in the science and the evidence. And if you guys follow our YouTube channel, we have so many fucking awesome guests on that are truly PhDs in the field who are narrowing down the evidence and breaking it down on the channel. They're doing full-on podcast interviews for us, data-driven, the Milo Wolfs. Crystal, who else have we had on there lately? There was one guy that I really fucking enjoyed.
Data-driven, Eric Helms.
Eric's been on there.
A bunch.
Yeah. So all these guys, obviously, they're truly PhDs, educated, teaching PhD programs, postdoctorate. They're in the lab, and then you have guys who are pretending to know what they're talking about, saying like you shouldn't go over 4 reps, you shouldn't do this and that. It's going completely against the actual evidence, but then they're saying they're science-based. So all the kids regurgitating them are saying they're science-based. And they're not. So everybody's arguing different levels of like, well, science is stupid and this and that. But it's insane to me because if there's one takeaway you can get from this rant, it's that no bodybuilder or anyone who's high level in any sport in their right fucking mind is not using the best practices that they believe are going to achieve an end result, which is in itself science-based. Everyone has a coach. The coach's job is to make sure they're applying what they believe is the most evidence-based approach for their client. Straight up, I have some bodybuilders in the past where I'm like, if you can just train a little harder and keep doing the same shit you're doing, I'm not worrying about any fucking nuance whatsoever. I'll program your stuff. I'll program some of your movements, but if you want to swap some shit out, feel free. I'm not trying to like cherry pick stuff. If you can just get people to train harder, progressively overload periodically, and kind of use a little bit of periodization on when they're going to be prepping contest and maintaining and massing, etc., you're on the right track. And that's a lot of science. And that's what most bodybuilders are doing, and they don't realize it, but then they're saying science is stupid. So you have a bunch of guys who are angry because there's a bunch of scrawny-ass kids claiming to be evidence-based that aren't actually evidence-based, and a bunch of bodybuilders that are slightly evidence-based because they've been anecdotally doing this shit for a long time, and the coaches have been implementing really good practices, and they're just butting heads. And fortunately, I think where we do something really well is we ignore the fuck out of all this shit. I'm getting people tagged in my stuff. We get people tagged on our YouTube channel. We have people talking shit in the comments. Yeah. We just want to provide a service of bridging a gap between wherever the fuck this is going wrong and just talking about it openly. And little rants like this and in little gems I can give to you all potentially help you, because then you know kind of like, okay, I understand where everybody's coming from. I just want that medium. I want to find the truth. I want to find what is actually best practices. And we can lead you in the right direction to people to follow and listen to, and we're to hear varying opinions. And that is why you never see me and Mike address stuff. We're not addressing the people talking shit on other YouTube channels. We're not addressing the people who are providing such skewed off information that it's clearly getting regurgitated from others. We're just trying to educate people to the best of our abilities. I mean, Mike has a PhD. I am highly educated myself with master's degrees. Crystal's very educated also. She's doing live Q&As on here, and she knows she can talk to the medical side of stuff very well. And I mean, Crystal's around me and Mike all the time. She sits in on 90% of our rants. She probably knows a lot more about hypertrophy training than most people. Very educated, very intelligent woman. So we're fortunate that we get to do this for you guys, because Bill, you're not wrong in stating that you're seeing this stuff and just kind of like repeating what you're seeing. Because yeah, that's what they're saying. They're saying science is stupid, but I'm here to tell you what they're saying is something they don't even understand, because they're using science, and they're mad at people who are claiming to use science that aren't actually using science. They're just using a regurgitation process. So it's a weird, it's like a tautological discussion where people are saying things one way versus another, but we're kind of all saying the same shit. But it's just unfortunate that it's getting skewed on like using words such as evidence-based, science-based, blah, 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 when sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Everybody's using a different definition of the word. So it's not increasing, I don't think. Frustration's always been there. So I've been in the industry now since 2011, and I've seen low volume, high volume, paleo, keto, all this shit make probably 2 to 3 rounds at this point. So all these evidence-based kids who are claiming never go over 4 reps in 3 years are going to be saying high volume was actually better. This just is what it is. So if we can just provide these amazing podcasts with these people who are actually in the field, who are leaning toward what the data is actually saying based on meta-analyses and regression models, we're just going to keep feeding you that stuff. I think that's what our channel does really well. I think that's what we do really well at RP. And I think that's why we have built such an amazing community of people who are really eager to learn, who just want to deal away with the bullshit of the people who are ranting on each other and shit posting because they don't know what else to make. You're never going to see me make a fucking floating head video. I'm getting people asking me, like, can you, like, dismantle this fucking guy? I'm like, I'm going to ignore this guy. I don't care. I'm going to provide you with some education. And if you see a varying viewpoint online, really dig into it and go watch some videos of, like, Data Driven, of Eric Helms, of Jeff, of all these guys that we bring in that are educated for real. And you let me know. But anybody who's on the line angrily blocking people and angrily going through things that you shouldn't see anger from, maybe they don't really know what they're talking about. I think anger in your kind of like area of expertise probably means that you have some kind of like lack or lapse in knowledge in that specific area, because it shouldn't come down to anger. If somebody's shoving somebody over a bench because they made a retort video of something, maybe they're a little insecure about this information they actually know. So, you know, again, not to dig at anybody. It's just like, that's what I'm seeing. So hopefully that helped you, Bill. Like I said, that I knew that one was going to just put me on a rant. So I wanted to get it out of the way because it just really is unfortunate. And the last part was, is there a point in a pro bodybuilder or strongman's career that some science-based principles based on studies of naturals, untrained and applied? Which is funny because I'm hearing the opposite of the people I just talked about. They're like, these untrained individuals in these studies are literally who we're doing these studies on. But then they're like saying, yeah, well, you can do all these high volumes because you're enhanced, and you can get away with intensity techniques and anything works because you're enhanced. But it's like, hold on. The data is showing high volumes are better, and it's on untrained individuals. So I'm confused of their argument. It doesn't make sense. I think principles, like the principles we teach, are literally from sports science, and a lot of it is conjecture based. So if you're able to conceptualize concepts instead of regurgitate shit from people, no, there's no point in anyone's career where it doesn't apply. You have to be able to conceptualize these concepts and understand why we're saying what we're saying. So for example, I just said at the beginning of this rant that inverted U we're finding doesn't really exist. But caveat to that, when you start taking consideration a 220-pound bodybuilder who's using a 4-inch of motion, slow eccentrics, pausing in the hole, push legs, pull split, more than likely that inverted U exists somewhere. That guy isn't doing 40 sets per body part per week and still growing, most likely. See, that's conjecture. What we see in these studies is that kind of stuff's not really controlled for too well. So these kids come in, usually they're doing one body part all the way up to 40, 50, 60 sets. You're still seeing some growth. You put all these pieces of these studies and puzzles together and all the principles that we're teaching, and you see something more like 10 to 20 might be smart, especially when you take into consideration the amount of time somebody actually has to be in the gym per week. And if you can make a shitload of gains on 10 to 20 sets per body part per week, hell yeah, let's do that. And if you can somehow increase over time and see if, taking into consideration everything I said, the range of motion, how long the session is going to take, actually utilizing those deep eccentrics and certain exercise selections, like all the heavy compounds versus isolation where they're at in your program, you're going to see some shifts down in the volume likely for any given session. I'm not going to be in there doing 20 sets in one session when I train the way I train, because I have a lot of heavy compound stuff. You guys have seen me train. My eccentrics are slow as hell. Me getting through a 20 set session in one go for one body part likely is not going to happen. So although I'm telling you that inverted U in the data we're not seeing that it's really existing, it probably does somewhere down the line, right? So you can't just say this is how it is. You have to use some level of conjecture. And whenever you get somebody who's really good with the principles, yeah, even in those later aspects of their career, the principles do still apply. That's why some of these guys currently utilizing like a 4 hard sets per session or per week approach are maintaining their muscle really well during a bodybuilding prep, because they have the anabolics. They're super fucking strong. They're using a lot of heavy compounds. They love to train to failure. So the more you train to failure, probably the less hard working sets you're doing in that session anyway, right? But if you are going to be somebody who leaves reps in the tank, maybe you can get away with adding a couple extra sets. Which one's better? Well, we're seeing the volume's probably a little better, but these guys are so advanced, they don't give a shit. They're maintaining all their muscle because they're on anabolics. But it's not saying that it's the best practice, but at least they're utilizing some level of thought because they know they're training to failure hard as shit, and they want to just back off on the sets a little bit. That's not a bad idea. So everybody's kind of arguing like really weird points based on not full pictures. And it's infuriating because what we do teach is principles. And most of these guys are using just basic fundamental principles that we are teaching you guys. And they're just pretending they're not, and like arguing with each other about the most crazy nuanced shit where they might agree if they had an actual conversation. Because I don't know who would disagree with that. You know, I might disagree with a lot of things somebody says, but the second we start diving into a conversation, and the guy's, well, he's like, I only do 4 sets per body part per week. And I'm like, okay, you could probably get away with a little more. He's like, yeah, but I train all the failure all the time and I only have 30 minutes to train. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. 4 sets sounds about right. 30 minutes in the gym. You train very hard to failure and you're using barbell back squats twice a week. Yeah, 4 to 6 makes sense to me. And you could probably maintain your muscle pretty well in that during a contest prep. I don't think that's not terrible. It's not a terrible idea. Do I think there's something that could be slightly a little better? Yeah, we can discuss that nuance. But I don't think what you're doing is so outlandish that I'm going to make a fucking talking head video about how stupid you are. So, yeah. Hopefully that was a good rant. Hopefully you guys got something out of that. Michael.